and welcome back to The Movies Made Us Do It. How you doing, Matt?
I'm pretty good, sir. How are you?
I'm all right. It's we're late as always. We are always late.
Yeah, I was way off with how late we were, though.
You were way off because I only found out the other day. People started posting. I was like, oh no, Matt was totally wrong.
Yeah, I'd heard someone say it was Monday, and I thought, okay, that's fine. We'd missed it by quite a bit, but it's fine.
Yeah.
And then it was like, hey, it's Thanksgiving today. It's like, oh shit.
Yeah. Well, look, we're not American. We don't need to know these things necessarily. And as I said in the last episode, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, subject of today, is a Christmas movie over here because we don't have Thanksgiving.
No.
So I've always seen it as a film you watched in the holidays, the Christmas holidays, as a kid.
When I first watched it as a kid, I watched it on TV.
Mm.
I think I thought it was just Thanksgiving was just what some Americans called Christmas.
Oh, really? That's interesting. I can see that because you're having turkey and stuff.
Yeah,
and
that's the thing that confused me.
There's often Christmas decorations already up as well, so it kind of, yeah.
So it's like, oh, it's just what they... Maybe it's not. It's what non-religious people call Christmas or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, when did you first see Planes, Trains, and Automobiles? I'm guessing.
Yeah, TV job.
TV. Same.
I'm pretty sure it would have been a Christmas TV.
Yes, I'm pretty sure I saw it at Christmas on TV, and then my parents ended up owning it on VHS. They were big fans of this film. Big fans of John Candy in general, yeah. I think. And it's easy to see why.
I think that's it. As a kid, I was a huge... I mean, this is a no-brainer. It's John Candy and Steve Martin, and I was a big fan of both.
And they work so well together in that kind of Abbott and Costello way.
Yeah.
You know, like Steve Martin's great as the straight man. John Candy's always fantastic in those more comedic roles. And between the two of them, they are a great double act in this movie.
I mean, do you know who Hughes originally wanted for the two roles?
No, I have no idea.
So Tom Hanks for the Martin part.
Okay.
And John Travolta.
Oh.
For the Candy part. And I think, okay. So Hanks apparently was busy. I can't remember what film he was doing. Big, I think it was. He was busy doing Big, so he couldn't do it. And the studio considered Travolta box office poison at that point.
I was going to say, yeah, late 80s was the...
So he was crashing out at that point. And so they were like, yeah, no. And I thought...
Tom Hanks I could see in the straight role.
Yeah. I could see Tom Hanks as kind of as either.
Yes, I really cannot see Travolta as either.
I think he'd come across as more creepy. He'd probably make him more serial killery.
And I will say for the record, I like a lot of John Travolta's movies.
Yeah.
I just don't see him in either of these roles succeeding particularly well. Let's put it that way.
No, I mean, yeah, very weird. I mean, there's lots of other sort of casting choices that sort of didn't come, but those are the ones that Hughes wanted originally. And it's okay, that's fucking weird.
Those are certainly some choices. Should we get into it?
Yeah, let's go.
Sure. So, we open with the sound of automation. Planes and vehicles of all kinds just kind of filling the credits, which are just kind of, classy black background, white text credits. Yeah. But yeah, we're just hearing all of the kind of automation. And we then cut to New York City. And Neil, played by Steve Martin, is looking at his watch, which is the worst watch I've ever seen in my life. It's just a really hard to fucking read watch. I hate watches that are just impossible to read.
Yeah.
And
really ugly.
It's really ugly and hard to read.
Really fucking expensive.
Oh no, I think that's the intention, is that it's really expensive. Because he works he's like advertising, isn't he?
Yeah.
And this opening scene gives me anxiety because I've been here, where especially when you've told your boss, you're like, I need to leave at this time today, and then it just keeps going on and you're just sat there like, what are we doing? What are we doing? But this guy, and I mean, I love they make a joke out of it in the end credits as well.
Yeah.
Where he's still looking at it.
Still there with his dinner next to him.
Yeah. But obviously he's got these options of these glamour shots, hasn't he? I guess they're going to be the cover of a magazine or something.
I think so.
And they're all just sat there in silence. And Neil's looking at his mate and he's like, I have to go.
Yeah.
I love it. And then you get that really awkward moment afterwards as well where he stops looking and like Neil looks kind of hopeful and they're all like, oh, what's he gonna say?
I love it because he turns around and looks at them.
Yeah.
They all lean in like holding their breath.
And then so they have to leave having no decision made. They've got to reconvene after the holidays, but now of course Neil is late for his flight, so his flight's at 6, right?
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
And I love that his friend. He goes to get in the elevator and he's like, "Oh God, I left my gloves. Can you pick them up? I don't need them. I'll pick them up later." And just as the doors close, and his mate's like, "You're never gonna make that fucking flight."
Yeah. Why don't you wait with me until the 8 o'clock and it'll be fine. And I think that I don't know whether it's in this version of the movie or not. There's a bit at some point where there's a shot of the wife watching the news, and I think they say that the airport's cleared up later. So if he did wait for
I didn't notice that if that is in this version,
he would have made it.
That's amazing. I didn't notice that if that is in this version, but of course he comes outside and it's New York 2 days before Thanksgiving. It's packed anyway, as I am led to believe New York always is, at least in movies. I'm sure it is. And of course he sees Kevin Bacon.
Yep.
And Kevin Bacon is also a sleazy businessman looking for a cab.
We should also say is that the friend, as it were, the agency is Lehman Ward, who was also Ferris's dad in Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Mm-hmm.
So in my head canon, even though they've got different names,
it's the same person.
It's Ferris's dad.
Well, that kind of,
Which also leads into this part where we see across the road Kevin Bacon when he's trying to get the character. And in my head, and probably in a lot of other people's heads, Kevin Bacon's character is the Jake Briggs character from She's Having a Baby.
Okay, yeah, so I can see that.
Hughes sort of, I guess, to use the modern term, Hughes-averse.
Like the Trading Places Coming to America kind of crossover thing. Yeah, I love those kind of things. That's a nice idea.
I do. I think it's just in my own head canon, if for nothing else.
It's interesting as well, isn't it? Because you think, well, if you have the rights to both, you could just name them the same, and then people could just decide.
But the problem with that one is that later on, the wife is actually watching it in bed.
Well, yeah, there is that. Yeah,
she's having a baby, which actually I don't think was out at that point. But yeah, she's what they're watching it because obviously, I guess Hughes owned the footage or something.
So they lock eyes from across the street because he's looking for this cab and he finally sees one. But as he's looking back, he notices Kevin Bacon is also eyeing the same cab. And they have this kind of standoff from the opposite sides of the road.
Yeah.
And I love they run for the cab and they've both got the same obstacles in their path on both sides. Now, of course, Kevin Bacon's character actually stops in time for the boxes that are wheeled out in front of him.
Yeah.
And Neil kind of laughs as he's running because he thinks he's getting away with it.
Yeah.
Neil, of course, is struggling because of his I guess his general fitness. He's like struggling to go. But so close to the finish line, he goes to cross the road, and of course he trips over some luggage that we'll come to later. And of course Kevin Bacon, he dusts himself up off the floor just in time to see Kevin getting into his cab and driving off. Now he looks back and he sees the luggage. It's quite distinctive luggage.
It's got, and you can actually see Dale's name on it.
You can, you can see the name. And he sees this. Is it a lawyer that flags down the next cab?
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, excuse me, like, you know, I know this is your cab, but I'm late for my plane. I wonder if I could appeal to your good nature." And the guy's like, "I don't have a good nature."
Yeah.
Like, excellent.
The thing about the fall is it's so visceral. That fall is a real crunch when he goes down.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
Nearly,
Yeah, it's a proper plan.
nearly ran over as well.
And he offers the guy $10, right?
Yep.
And he's like, no chance. He's like, well, all right, $50. And of course, the whole time, this cab driver's like, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
But then we hear someone tap the boot, and he gets out of the cab, and he starts putting the box that he tripped over into the cab as he's talking to this. Oh, he's an attorney, isn't he? He's an attorney.
Yeah. Same thing, sort of.
And I love, as soon as he opens his wallet, the guy's like, "Well, if you were willing to go to 50, you can afford 70."
Yeah, 75, I think he is.
75, yeah. So he gives him the cash. Attorney just turns around, walks away with a smile on his face.
He says to him, "Have a happy holidays." He says, "Well, this will help."
Yeah. And of course he turns only to find the cab has gone.
Yeah.
But you know, he's just having a breakdown now, because then he runs after the cab in the middle of the road.
Of Martin's characters, he gets to the point where he starts becoming unhinged.
Yes.
And just chases after this fucking cab down in like New York Street, screaming that that's my cab.
Yeah, and of course it gets stuck in traffic to where he can catch the cab, and he opens the back door and just starts screaming in Dale's face, and he just looks terrified for a moment. He's like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah.
And then the door closes and they drive off. So of course Neil then has to get a bus, and he is like, I think he's like, he gets to the airport with like 2 minutes to spare, and it's like, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't get this flight now anyway, because you'd have to have checked in before 2 minutes before you arrive, I would imagine. But of course, you know, he's like, he's gonna try his best, and then he realizes the flight is delayed. The flight going to Chicago is delayed, and he's told he has to contact ticket agents or whatever. I think we then cut to Neil's family, who are you know, having a lovely dinner, which I think Neil was meant to be there for that dinner, right?
I that's the impression, yeah.
And so he obviously isn't there, and he phones them. The family are kind of sat there talking about, is like grandpa coming or something, or grandma coming to...
The daughter says, "Do you think grandpa will give me a noogie this year?" It's like, yes, but always gives you a noogie. And I love the kid, the boy says, "Will he give, why wasn't he give me a noogie? I like noogie." She's like, "That's because he gives you Indian burns." You think, fucking hell. And Indian burns, I guess we called them Chinese burns. That was always what we called them. Well, when I was a kid, it's what we called them, Chinese burns. But I guess that's a regional thing.
So Neil is waiting for the delayed flight. It's now like an hour later, I think. He's still waiting for his flight. And we should point out as well, all of that, and this is a reoccurring thing through this movie, all of that was completely unnecessary, because if he just got on a bus, he would have got there in time and found it was delayed anyway, and it wouldn't have made any difference to his life. He like stressed his whole day up for no reason there. Yeah. That whole bit at the start there.
But I think it's that thing that I think.
Oh, it's so natural. So much of this film is so natural.
It's the sort of thing that I've done.
Yeah.
You think, right, I've got a decision to make here, and you know you're going to make the fucking wrong one.
Yep, but you just got to make one. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, oh, do I do this? Do I go this way, or do I wait? And it's like, no, fuck it. I'm gonna charge ahead, and you charge ahead, and he's like, no, you'd have already got it if you'd have fucking just gone the other way.
Yeah. But of course, he looks over. Who's sat opposite him, and it's Dale who's reading a book.
Yep.
And Neil just has that look on his face immediately, and Dale's like, I know you, don't I? Why do I know you? I'm usually good with names. And he's like, you stole my cab.
That book, The Canadian Mountain, that he's reading.
Yeah.
So Ryan Reynolds pays to have that put in all the Deadpool movies.
Really?
Yeah, it's in all the Deadpool movies. Ryan Reynolds absolutely
I'd never
loves
noticed.
He loves this movie. So in Deadpool 3,
Mm.
the car that they get later on is actually in the Netherworld thing.
Oh yes, yes, it is. Yeah,
yeah. It's so yeah. He loves this movie so much that he pays. He says he pays like $1,000 or something for this book to be wheeled out and give to him, and then he hides it somewhere in the on the.
That's brilliant. I love this movie. So
yeah.
But yeah, then he's like, you stole my cab, and he's like, oh yeah, that's right, you were like
he says I've never stolen anything in my life.
Oh yeah, but then he's like, oh my god, yeah, you were that crazy guy. You scared the bejesus out of me.
Come to think of it, it was awfully easy to get a cab during rush hour.
Yeah, it suddenly dawns on him that maybe he did actually steal his cab. And then he says, well, I'll forget it, but
and I like he says to him, hey, can I get you a beer and a hot dog? And his Dale, I'm sorry, Neil's face creases. It's like, oh, it's like he's like, no, that's fine. It's just a hot dog, then. He's like, no.
He's just got that kind of face.
Yeah,
like he can just he can emote disdain so well.
Yeah.
And it's made so much worse because Dale is so like happy and like happy-go-lucky, or at least he gives that impression.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then
you also get, it's like the first inkling of you also get of how fussy he is about food and things, because he keeps offering him things like lifesavers and stuff, and which I think is like the equivalent of, I think, polos,
right,
over here. And then he says, oh, he goes, I'm very picky about what I put in my body. And you think, okay, right, he's one of those. Okay.
Yeah. And then, of course, another reoccurring motif. Neil is pissed off and decides to take it out on the person working on the plane. Yeah. He walks up to one of the air hostesses and he's like, sorry, it's a delayed flight. We've got to, put you onto a different flight, onto different seats, right? It's not the seats he intended because this is a later flight. He's
been
moved from first class, right? Yeah.
And his seat assignment is in coach, I think.
Mm-hmm. And he's basically like, she's like, well, look, we can give you a refund. He's like, I don't want a refund.
Yeah, if you give it to whatever it is, when you get to the airport,
you basically get a free flight.
Yeah,
that's not good enough.
But I also love the fact that she's like angrily dealing with him, and then there's this suave, handsome guy gets on.
Oh yes,
and
yeah. He looks like
bypasses him and like calls her by name, and like they sort of do the sort of kiss thing, and then he sort of just, can I sit anywhere? And she's like, yeah, sit anywhere, and you can see again Neil's face is like, fuck her, you absolute bastard.
The guy that looks like he looks like budget Kurt Russell.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, and of course, like you know who we sat next to.
But that's what he says. He says, great. He says, I get bumped. He goes, I get all this thing. He goes, I can't wait to see what happens next.
yeah.
He cuts his face. Is this a coincidence or what?
Yeah, I know, and he's got that shit-eating grin as well. It's so good. And then, of course, to make it worse, he's stuck between. To make it worse, he's stuck between Dale and the old guy.
And the young dude, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the great thing about his character, and I think particularly because it's John Candy playing him, is that his character could so easily just be this appalling, evil, fucking horrible guy that you don't want to spend any time with. But because it's Candy, and even though he's fucking annoying, you just want to stay with him anyway.
Yeah.
You sort of overlook some of his more terrible tendencies.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the flight, Del says, "Oh, I never introduced myself. I'm Del. I forget his last name. Griffith. That's right, because it's on the box, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he says he's like director of sales, shower curtain ring division of whatever company he works for.
Lighting and fittings or something.
Yeah, which seems like such
American lighting and fittings or something.
And he's so proud. He's got his little leather wallet, the display wallet to show all the different rings. And this feels like it's throwaway, but it helps them so much as they go through the movie. These shower curtain rings save the day on more than one occasion.
The shower curtain rings keep popping up in the movie as well.
Yeah.
Because if you notice when
they get the apartment.
Yeah, but when he loses the cab, when he looks down, there's 2 shower curtain rings in the puddle.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
From the cab as the cab leaves. And then they pop up again, like when he's in the shower later on. Obviously, you see them, and so they do like pop up throughout the movie.
And I love how Del then starts saying, "Oh, I hate it when people talk during a flight. If you ever like, there's one thing that doesn't grind my gears is people talking." And he says, "Oh, if you catch me going on, you just nudge me later." And then of course he takes.
I won't want to be seen as a blabbermouth.
Yeah, and then of course he takes his shoes off.
Oh God, yeah. And my dog's barking. That is one of my favourite expressions. My dogs are barking.
Yeah, And the thing is, we all experience this. Like, if you've been walking or on your feet all day, it is nice to take your shoes off. So you get that. But the fact that he does it on a flight in front of him, and then the socks.
It's in such close proximity.
Yeah, it's right in his face.
Like you said, it's the shoes are one thing, but then the sock comes off as well. And I love the old man's face is just pure disgust.
Yeah.
And I love it. He starts spinning the sock around, and you're like, "Oh, you gross fucker."
Yeah. And then of course he's then sat there on the flight. They're both to either side of him asleep on him.
Yeah.
The old man's like proper on his shoulder, coughing his guts up, asleep. Yeah. And then I think, like, doesn't Del just wake up to say, like, I'll give you like.
And his eyes sort of like click open, and he says, "Was it?
There's no way we're landing.
$5 in my right nut that we're not landing."
Yeah, and then he goes back to sleep. That's like all he says.
Yeah.
So then, of course, his wife, who did say she would stay up and wait up for him, is now obviously gone to bed. And he says, he phones her and he says, "Look, we couldn't land in Chicago." Wakes her up and says that he's in Wichita, right?
Yeah, he's in Wichita.
And he says, well, took off from New York, but obviously they closed Chicago, which we did see, didn't we? Because it did cut back and you saw all the flights cancelled.
Yeah.
So while they were in the air, all the flights got cancelled. They couldn't land, so they've gone to Wichita.
And I love that the guy, the announcer on the cancelled flight guy is the I can't remember what his bloody name is now, but he's the Bueller guy from Ferris Bueller.
Yeah.
Obviously, who's he appears in a number of Hughes movies, like a lot of the cast does.
Yeah.
And I like that on the board behind him, the destination is nowhere.
Mm. So Neil gets off the phone to his wife, and Del comes up and kind of inquires about it. He's like, "I don't think that's any of your business." And he says, like, what's the flight situation? And Del's like, "There is no way we're getting out of here tonight. It's just, it's not going to happen." But he says it with such a smile on his face.
Yeah.
And it just makes it so much worse.
And I like, he says, "Are you saying I could be stuck in Wichita?" And he says, "No, I'm saying you are stuck in Wichita."
And of course he suggests trying to find a hotel, right? And he's like, you're never finding a hotel.
Yeah, and from my geography of America is not terribly great. From what I understand, that's like Wichita's like 2 states away from Chicago.
Yeah.
So it's not like just down the road. No.
And and then of course the Bueller man says, "Hey, we've cancelled the flight altogether now. It's not even delayed. Nothing's landing in Chicago. That's it." Yeah. So of course he I think he tries to make another phone call, or he does make another phone call to let his wife know that he's not flying on that flight either. And Del's just waiting for him. He's like, as soon as he turns around, Del's stuck in the back of the queue, like, "Oh, hey, he says, hey, while you were calling your wife, I called this inn, and I know the manager of this inn. So I'll make sure you get a room. Which, Neil clearly despises this man.
Yep.
But he's like, oh, okay, because he sees that's right, because as he says it, like, you can tell Neil's about to decline, and then he looks around and he sees this guy uncomfortably asleep next to a bin, and he's like, yeah fine, fuck it, okay. And this is where Neil realizes, because he sees his luggage for the first time, and he realizes that's the luggage he tripped over.
Yeah, is that your trunk?
Yeah. So they get the cab, that ridiculous cab,
Doobie's cab.
Yeah.
I mean I love it. Doobie's got this great pompadour haircut, and he's got this pimped out cab, which is just fucking awesome. And I love the roof is just made up of a collage of nude women.
Yeah, but he says like how far to the hotel, and he's like, oh, it won't take very long, assuming he doesn't. He's like, and then after a while he's like, why are you going this way? And he's like, well, he looks like Neil. This guy looks like he's new, so I thought you might want to look around the town.
Yeah,
he might want like a tour.
Never been here before, so. And I love the way they do it. Dale just says he's proud of his city. He just wants to show you round. It's like, no, he's not.
Yeah, he says, oh, that's a rare thing these days. Yeah. So, they finally eventually get to the inn, and
I love the way the car like lowers as well when they.
Yeah. It's like a lowrider, and he like lowers it as they get there. It's amazing. So they finally get to this inn, and of course, Dell's like, yeah, stick with me, it'll be cool, and you could tell Neil is already regretting his decision.
Yeah,
he knows he's made a mistake.
But you also hear that you get the guy comes out and actually does call him by name, so he clearly has got these.
He wasn't lying.
Yeah, he's not lying. He does know all these people. He has got these customers, and they do seem to love him.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing, isn't it? Because you get the impression that Neil's got this big, hoity-toity New York job in a skyscraper, but Dell's clearly the better salesman. Like guys love Dell, he would sell his shower curtains. And he's just very personable, so you get the impression that he would probably make a better salesman generally, because people know him by name, they remember him, they like him. But yes, and of course they have to then pay for the hotel room.
Yeah.
Oh no, he pays first, doesn't he? I think he pays first because he says, "Oh yeah, we'll have to pay for your room," and this is where the cards get switched up, right?
Yeah.
Because they both have the same style of card. He picks up the wrong one. But then, of course, the guy's like, well, I'll take you guys to your room. And he's like, room? And of course, he said, yeah, you've got to share.
You got to share. And I love they're stood in the doorway of this room.
Yeah.
They're looking at him, and they're just sort of staring at the single bed.
Yeah.
And then, well, it's not a single bed, but it's not double.
It's like the smallest double, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guess it is a double. I think most people are used to queens or kings, right?
Yeah,
so it's a standard double.
And it's actually not that bad a room. It's an okay room.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's way better than some of the shitholes I've stayed in.
It's true.
That's for sure.
Same here. I've stayed in some total fucking shitholes. I'd have loved for this bloody room.
Oh, when we were younger, me and my friend had this thing where we would try and book the cheapest, shittest hotels we could just for fun, because we were only going out like to gigs or club nights or whatever in London or whatever, and it was like, let's just find the cheapest. I need
to sleep there anyway. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, there comes a point when you're like, we've pushed this too far.
Yeah,
Never again. Let's, we've reached our limit.
I don't think this door shuts properly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure we're going to be safe in here.
Yeah. And of course, Del, being nice, says, "Oh, do you want to take a shower?" And Neil immediately takes that as if it's like some like sex orgy that he's planning.
No. But I love the way when they're stood in the doorway and they're looking at the bed, and Neil looks over at Dale, and Dale, you've got that sort of like low shot, looking up at his face in almost shadow, and he's got this sort of slightly leery look on his face.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no. And it's like, no, because I didn't mean together. I just meant, would you like to go first?
Yeah. So Neil has the shower and obviously notices the shower curtains.
Yeah.
And of course the shower stops working just as he's washed his face, so he gets soap in his eyes, and it's all good slapstick. Meanwhile, Deli's got the picture of his wife. And I always think I think this film does a really good job of the audience knows exactly what's going on with Del from this point on. I think it's really clear to everyone except Neil, because Neil's just being he's just self-obsessed. He's self-absorbed. He doesn't care.
Doesn't care about it. Certainly doesn't care about Dale.
No. I always thought that was a really, really well done. That it's kind of clear to the audience almost immediately what's going on with Del, but not to Neil. And yes, so Neil obviously comes out of the shower after he finally manages to have it, and all he's got left, I don't even know if he thinks it's a really small towel or whether he knows that it's just a cloth, like it's a face cloth.
Yeah, it kind of. The way that it's shot, it kind of looks like it could be a towel.
Like a really small hand towel.
First see it, yeah. And then when he reaches for it and falls over, it's clearly a fucking flannel, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I love the way he he takes it and he sort of gently dabs his face, and then he tries to like put it over his shoulder like you would.
He tries to use it like a proper towel. Yeah.
Yes, like flossing your back with it. It's like, it's tiny little. But I love that. Meanwhile, you've got Del in the other room, putting money in the vibrating bed thing, and he's sat there with this vibrating bed.
Yeah.
And this is one of the ones where this Hughes shot enough footage for a 4-hour movie,
right?
And it was cut down sort of, a number of times, but it was cut down, and then I think there was a test screening, and so the ending was different. I will talk about that later. But there was a number of things that I think the audience didn't get or didn't enjoy, so they changed it. But this is one of the things that was cut down, which I think was slightly annoying that they cut this down, because so what happens in the missing scene, which I think they found, I think 2022, I think they found these missing scenes. So Dale orders pizza, and Neil wants a salad, and so the pizza turns up. Dale pays for it with Neil's money.
Yeah. And
the pizza delivery boy is the guy that robs them.
Oh, okay. Because right? it weirdly, the shot of him eating pizza is in the trailer for the movie.
Yeah,
that makes a lot more sense now, because that guy comes out of nowhere, just breaks in and like robs the place.
He stiffs him on the tip.
Right. See that scene would have given better context to what happens.
He pays him $1, and he obviously
can see he's got hundreds in his wallet. Yeah.
Yeah. So he obviously comes back later, but he's got pizza. He's got a 6-pack, and it's also opens the 6-pack on the bed, which is why later on when
because later on he's like, "Oh, I didn't think they'd go off like that," and he's like, "You put the beers on a vibrating bed, you moron!" Like, what did you think was going to happen? Yeah,
and he's just about the sleeping in a pool of beer, and that that should have not been cut.
That feels necessary. That would have improved.
I guess it's just otherwise it's just a random robbery, but.
Yeah, no, I think that actually would have improved this scene actually. But I do love that Del, like Neil, obviously is using these shitty, and I mean, I've been in some of these kind of hotels, the worst pillows.
Yeah,
and Del's got his own pillow. He's like, "Oh, sorry, I would swap, but I've got these I'm hyper allergic. That's why I've got this. I always travel with my own pillow."
Yeah, I'm allergic to sponge.
That's right. Yeah, he's allergic to sponge.
I think that's the first thing that Dale pulls out of his trunk when he starts unpacking his own pillow, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. So they're going to go to sleep, and of course the beer has presumably only spilled on Steve's side of the bed.
Yes,
Neil's side of the bed.
Yeah.
Sorry. But in any case, they say good night to each other. And of course, Neil tries to go to sleep, but of course, Dale is going to be the most irritating person in the world.
I love it's the awkwardly sort of like trying to get comfortable, and they first sort of try and sort of settle it like facing each other, and then immediately no.
But then I like Dale starts trying to read a book, and then he starts reading it with a lighter because he can't see.
Yeah, I love that. I love the way it's shot. You're sort of like you're back to with Martin's face, and you've got looking up to sort of Candy's sort of with this. You can just see the book above his head, sort of thing.
Yeah,
and then it's that you hear the click as the lighter goes on, and again it's Martin's face. It's like, what the fuck?
And then it keeps cutting back to his wife in bed alone. And then it cuts back to him, and he's like cracking his neck, and just
oh yeah,
just all the annoying things he could possibly do.
It's the cracking of the neck, and then it's
it's gross.
The sinuses is absolutely gross.
It's absolutely awful. It's the fact that he says sorry, and then he just keeps doing it.
Yeah, that's it. He stops. And you think there's a moment where it's like, oh, that's it.
That's really bad. I shouldn't have done
that. And then he does it again.
Yeah, then he keeps going.
And basically, that's where he kicks off, isn't it?
Yeah. He's just like finally had enough. And of course, like he like gets up and he's like, that's it. And Dell's like, what? It's like I don't understand.
He says you're really insensitive.
Yeah, he says you're not a very tolerant person, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And then, of course, Neil just loses it. He's like, he goes through the whole affair. You stole my cab, you did this, you did that. And Dell's kind of like, hey, I got you this hotel. Like, he's actually, despite being gross, he has actually gone out of his way to try and help him,
He does say, I let you pay for it so that you wouldn't feel like an
intruder.
An intruder. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. But yeah. So he's like, I told you how to book a room. He's like, well, why don't you go sleep in the lobby? And he's like, I hope you wake up so stiff you're not even able to move.
Amazing tirade of
wanting a vomit bag and
reading that. It's like when you're talking to people, it's like just stop, just pay attention to who you're talking to, because couldn't you tell I didn't want you to talk to me when I was reading the vomit bag?
He says like something like doesn't he say like when you talk you have to discriminate. You can't just say everything that comes to mind. You have to be somewhat interesting.
Your anecdotes don't go anywhere. Here's the thing. Have a point.
Yeah.
Have a point. Your anecdotes aren't funny. They don't go anywhere. The way that he says something about, I could be at an accounting conference.
Yeah, he's like, for days and days and days.
Yeah, how could you stand being at this conference? It's easy because I've met Del Griffith.
Yeah. And I love John Candy's face during this.
Yeah.
Like, he's genuinely really hurt by this.
Yeah, his eyes are welling up. And
It's really well acted. And it's one of those things, like, which it's such a natural thing where I don't know if you've ever done this. I know I've done this before, where you've just totally lost your fucking rag.
Yeah. And
then you realize too late, right at the end, you're like, I have really stepped over the line.
Yep.
And I feel like such an asshole now. And I think that Steve Martin does an amazing job of his facials as he realizes he's like, I've gone too far. Yep. It's like, fuck. I've gone too far, because it is like kicking a puppy. John Candy's face, he's just so hurt.
It's exactly like that, and I think that, again, that's the brilliance of John Candy.
Yeah,
he with a look he can completely destroy you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what he does here, and it's
and he says, "Oh, I'm an easy target if it makes you feel better." He's like properly hurt.
It's such a beautiful little speech he gives, which I'm not going to try and repeat because it's...
Well, the bit I love the most is he says, yeah, I do talk too much, but I also listen too much.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a really lovely line.
Yeah. And he just says, with me, you get what... I'm the real deal. Like, you get what...
Yeah, he says, I like me. My wife likes me. My customers like me,
Yeah.
And clearly his customers do, by the way. That has been, like, evident so far.
Yeah.
And of course I love as he goes back to the bed, he just looks at his wife the whole time. Yeah. He walks around the bed and then sits there and then just lies there looking at his wife.
But I do like it that you Neil is kind of you get that, like you said,
he's gone too far and he realizes totally.
And he's sort of like he's sort of looking around and he's feeling it. And I love that the camera goes back to Candy and he's in the bed looking over his shoulder, looking at him.
Yeah, he does the look back.
His head goes back.
Oh, it's so funny. It's so good. And then of course I love that, like, without saying a word, he just gets back in bed and they go back to sleep.
Yeah.
And then of course we get the thief who breaks in, steals all the cash out of both of their wallets. Now, I was actually going to say this always felt a bit weird that this guy just broke in. It's like, I guess it's fine, but now you've said that, I think that would have been much better context, actually.
Yeah, I mean, you do get people that...
Well, of course it happens.
Hotels, because they're easy to get... Sometimes they can be easy to get into. And it's clearly it's not a shithole hotel, but it's clearly a cheaper one.
Yeah.
So, it could just be a random thing, but it would have made a lot more... It would have been better, I think, if they would have kept that scene in.
Yeah, definitely. But I love the next morning, the fucking state. It's like empty beer cans, Cracker Jack bits everywhere all over the bed. And of course, Del and Neil just hugging each other in bed, spooning.
Oh, it's such a great shot of him just big spoon, little spoon, and he's nuzzling his ear, and
I like that Neil's like, why are you nuzzling my ear? And he's like, I don't know, why are you holding my hand?
Yeah.
And then he's like, where's your other hand? And he's like, between the two pillows.
That is I think that is one of the funniest things I have.
It's so good.
Ever seen. I still absolutely adore it.
I think the reaction when they realize what they've done and they have to start talking about football to try and man themselves back up.
You see those bears? Yeah.
So funny. Oh,
they're so brilliant. I fucking love that scene.
It's brilliant. They are a really good double act. They really are.
Which it always surprised me that they never sort of, did more. You'd have thought they were so good.
Maybe not the same characters, but just like similar situation, similar characters. Just let them do that. Like I said, Abbott and Costello kind of double act.
Yeah,
because I think they are that good.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, Neil goes to the bathroom to wash. Starts washing his face half asleep, and then he smells his hands, and he's like, "What the hell?" And he looks down. And he's got these disgusting socks in the sink.
Yeah.
And then doesn't he try and dry his face in his wife fronts as well?
It's at that point that you hear Dale shout at him, "Hey, if you're gonna brush your teeth, remove my socks."
Oh yeah, he tried. Yeah, he says too late.
And then I love that they're drying his face in Dale's humongous pants.
Yeah. And I love Neil phones his wife again, and he's like, I'm still in Wichita, and she's like, "What? You're still in Wichita?" And he's like, "What?" She's like, "What? You at the airport?" He's like, "No, I ended up staying at a hotel with this guy I met." And she's like, "Are you insane?"
Yeah, you stayed with a stranger. You mental.
So then I think we cut to the diner, and they're having breakfast together. And you get like that Marge with the woman with Marge hair is serving them. And they start talking, and of course Dell's like, "We could get a train. Maybe the train is the way to go." And he's like, "Are you crazy?" He's like, "Oh no, I know a guy." As he does, Dell always knows a guy. And he's like, "Yeah, we can get a train." Dell offers to pay, but Neil's like, no, I'll get it. It's fine. He's like, "Oh no.
I've paid for everything else so far. Why break the habit?"
Yeah. So then he looks at his wallet and realizes all of his money's gone. And of course he starts accusing Dell immediately, and Dell is really hurt. Dell is like, I would never. He's like, "I would never steal from you."
I'll make many things, but I'm not a thief.
Yeah, and he's like, "Right, okay, well, here's my wallet. Count how much money. You'll see there's, I think he says there's like 200 and something, dollars in it."
He says, "Well, if you're going to steal it, you weren't going to put it in your own wallet, are you?" He says, "What?" He says, "You check my money." He says, "You check my money." And I love it. He just looks at it, sees it empty, just bangs it on the door. He goes, "No, you haven't." And then I love it. He says, "What? What do you mean?" He goes, "We've been robbed." And
Neil's like, "Really?"
He just goes, "Oh, do you think so?" And like, they were discussing the cards and things. It's just brilliant.
They're talking about because Dell's talking about his like outlet store cards and
the long and tall shop or something.
Yeah,
but that's from the Northwest or something, because it doesn't really help us here.
But Dell has arranged transport. Another one of his favors he's called in. Isn't it like Gus's son or something?
Gus's
he says.
Son, yeah. Owen Mooney.
And of course this absolute piece of shit pickup pulls it.
I think this is the first movie that Dylan Baker was in.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and apparently that whole character and all the tics were all him.
Oh, wow.
He came up with all those things.
It's a really good. It's a really funny character.
Yeah, and the woman who plays his wife was like, it was so hard to keep a straight face throughout those entire scenes.
It must be way harder when someone's ad-libbing, because at least if you know the lines, you're like, "I know this is coming up." And
I think that's always one of the things that problems that people said they had when they were with Robin Williams, because Robin Williams would just go off and everybody would just sit and watch him, and they would forget to like film him, or forget that they were supposed to be doing a scene.
Yeah. But yeah, so he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna drive you to which you're gonna drive us to Wichita to get a train, and he's like, the train doesn't come out of Wichita.
He says people. Is it only hogs? Was it hogs and cattle go there? People trains at this other place,
Stubbsville or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like the way when the car turns, the pickup turns up, and Neil says, "Is this him?" And Doug goes, "Oh, I hope
not." Yeah. And of course they start struggling with Dell's case. And he's like, no, don't you leave that there. It's like, and he gets his wife to put the baby down. She starts getting out, and it's like, oh no,
easy ass out of the car.
Yeah,
help him with that trunk. And I'm like, oh no, it's fine because she may be skinny and small, but she's strong.
Her baby came out sideways.
Yeah, her first baby came out sideways, and she didn't scream or nothing. And I love her face. Her face is like full victory face. It's like, I'm hard. And I love when they do the introductions to each other, and he's spitting that chewing tobacco like on the floor. When he shakes Candy's hand, and then just before he shakes
Neil's, he spits.
He spits, and he almost catches it in his hand. Mm-hmm. So apparently that scene, they filmed it a number of times, and they couldn't get it right. And Hughes went over to Baker and said, "Just do something gross, is to spit in your hand or something." Because so when you see him, when he puts his hand in Dell's, Martin's face is genuine disgust because he didn't expect it, and it's his face. And apparently, as soon as the scene ended, he ran off and washed his hand.
That's amazing. I love then they're in the back of this pickup covered in hay. And Neil's like, oh, how far is it to Stubbsville or wherever it is? And Dell's like, oh, it's not far. It's like 30 miles, maybe 40, no more than 45, depending on which way they go. Could be up to 75. And of course, there's a dog in the hay as well.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you've got that. He looks down and he sees a pair of discarded gloves, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And he sort of reaches down, and you get the dog. It's like a genuine jump scare. This dog just
comes out of nowhere. Yeah.
Out of nowhere. He's like, he goes to get it. The dog nips me. He's like, nip me. Because I love the way Dale just goes, let him have the gloves.
Yeah. And they're like, what temperature is it? And he's like, 1.
Yeah.
And then they pull up, and they're even the dog's frozen.
Those brilliant freezing faces with the dog with the missing teeth.
But finally, the trainers come in, and you never know whether he did it on purpose. But Neil's like, oh, they didn't have two together.
I've always thought he's full of shit. I've always thought he's totally bought separate.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's like, oh well, he's like, oh, that's a shame, but we were lucky to even get here. It's like, and he's like, oh hey, do you want to meet for a drink on the train? He was like, no, I'm gonna go to sleep. And he's like, oh well, anyway, it's been interesting.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh yeah, oh Neil, and just they're getting on the train. He's like, Neil, I need your address to pay back for the ticket. And he's like, it's a gift, because he's like, I do not want this man knowing my address. Yeah. Like,
absolutely not.
The end. They get back, and it's like, that's the end of the movie. It's a happy ending. But yeah,
I love this bit with Neil, because he sat there next to this girl reading a magazine, and he's like. He's so happy. He feels like
he's done it.
That's it. He's got on the train.
He's got rid of Dell.
It's going to be plain sailing from here.
Yeah.
And he's making conversation with the girl, and he's like,
beautiful scenery out the train. It's all wonderful.
And he basically gets himself a little sleep.
Yeah, he does. He finally gets some rest.
Yeah.
Who knows for how long, but somewhere along the way, the train breaks down, of course.
Yeah.
So now they're stuck in the middle of nowhere. Like, it's in the middle of a bunch of fields.
Yeah,
and the train driver's like,
farmland.
If you walk like I don't know, 4 miles that way, then a coach will pick you up or whatever.
And take you the rest of the way.
And he sees Del, and I think this is like one of those moments where, you know, he has a choice here.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to. And I genuinely think part of him does really like Del at this point. He's starting to come round to Del because he does feel sorry for him.
Well, I think, you know, that's
that camaraderie is growing.
He's a genuine guy, you know.
Yeah.
So there's got to be at least a little bit of you know, genuine warmth towards him.
Yeah. Yeah, and he sees him struggling, and you can tell he's weighing it up, because at first he kind of shakes his head and smiles. He's like, what an idiot. But then he keeps looking, and he's like, oh, God damn it. And I think they make eye contact, don't they? Which is when he's like, oh, fuck.
Yeah. And so the train, clearly, no companies wanted to be involved in this movie.
Sure. Well, yeah, it would be bad for your transport company, right?
You know, so obviously they had to make up their own, you know, airplanes and their own sort of train. So
Makes sense.
This train was I think they repaired some track and repainted this train, and apparently it's still there. This train is.
There's a lot of movie trains are still where they were.
Yeah, they just
the fugitive train crash is still there.
Yes, I've heard that. Yeah.
I think it just costs so much to move the bloody things that they're like, yeah, sod it, leave them.
It's fine. They would just leave it there.
Cheaper just to leave it where it is. Yeah.
And I know later on when they get to the rental place that whole airport rental place they built. It's a set. They built that.
Oh really?
Yeah, they built that. And when he's in the car park, all of those cars were rentals. They basically just had an empty space that they made into a car park and hired a load of rental cars. The stuff they must have they spent on this movie is ridiculous for like weird things, like just the amount of rental, like so many hundred rental cars to fill up this space.
Yeah.
I mean, the worst thing is, you know, the house they built that from Neil's house. They built it from scratch. It wasn't an existing house.
That is ridiculous.
They spent a ridiculous amount of money, which pissed off the, you know, was it Paramount? I can't remember which company it was. And it's like, it's Paramount. It's like they spent all this money on this house. It's like they built a 7-room house from scratch. It's like they couldn't have found a house somewhere. It's just one of those weird expenses that they decided to go for.
Yeah. So they're on the coach, and there's like annoying kids running around. Del is stuffing his face with snacks and whatnot.
You mentioned the nice little thing where he does pick up his trunk and.
Oh yeah, that's what I said. Yeah, he does eventually decide to pick it up. And you know, there's all the obnoxious things on this one coach that you see on coaches. You know, kids being little assholes running up and down. You've got the couple obnoxiously making out.
But they're actually sat in the bus station. They're sat there in the bus station, and there's a like weird old guy next to him with like mice running around him.
Yeah.
It's like, what the fuck is that? It's like the weirdest little sort of thing. And I like, Neil says to him, "Hey, you ever been on a bus before?" He says, you know, he says to him, "Are you in a bad?" He says, "You're in a bad mood." He goes, "Am I ever?" And he says, "Ever been on a bus before?" And he says, "No." He says, "I don't think your mood's going to improve."
And then of course, Del starts to sing along on the bus.
Oh man! But first you get they're sat there eating, and there's the couple next to them.
Yeah, I said that the couple obnoxiously making out.
But I love the fact that they're like right over, and Dale nudges him and goes, "Hey, check that out."
Yeah, and he gets caught. Yeah.
And he looks over, and he's like there, and the guy looks up to him and goes, "Hey, take a picture. It'll last longer." And I love that Dale's just pissing himself. He's like, "You got caught. You got caught."
But Del starts this sing along, and of course the coach is loving it. They all get into it, apart from Neil. Eventually he's like, "Hey, who's got another song?" And Neil's like, "I've got one." He's gonna try and get involved. And I don't know what song it is he tries to start singing.
3 Coins in a Fountain.
Yeah, but it obviously goes over absolutely terribly.
Yeah, it's from a movie.
The whole coach look at him. Song. The whole coach look at him so furiously.
Yeah, then you'll turn around and like, what the fuck are you singing?
And then Neil just starts singing the Flintstones.
Yeah.
So
apparently in this scene, it would have been one of Jerry Ryan's first jobs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she was supposedly had a character in the scene, but she couldn't keep a straight face. Apparently, she couldn't stop laughing, so they basically fired her and shot the whole scene.
Yeah, so they make it to St. Louis by coach.
Yeah.
And then Del does what Del does best. He finds every goddamn excuse he can to sell as many shower rings as he can.
Oh man!
I think he's telling like they're really rare earrings and like all kinds of nonsense.
What was it? The first one is was it an autograph? Oh, what's the bloody name he says?
I honestly can't remember.
Oh damn! I wrote it down somewhere. Oh, he says was it Diane Sawyer? Yes, he says this is a genuine Diane Sawyer autograph earring. Then he says it's Celtic ivory. And then he says,
and for people that haven't, you should have watched this film if you're listening to this. But if you haven't, they are quite clearly the shittest plastic shower curtain rings you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah, and he says these are Walter Cronkite moon rings. They're full of helium, so they're nice and light. And then I love that he's got those 3 girls.
With the purple
wearing them.
Yeah,
and he's like, oh, because with those earrings in, because you could definitely pass for 18, and they're just handing over
children. Like,
full of money.
Meanwhile, Neil's trying to make a phone call, and the way he picks up this disgusting public phone. So good.
Between the top between his thumb and forefinger.
Yeah. And of course we see that his daughter's giving some performance, presumably some Thanksgiving sing along performance, and she says, I can't remember if it's this scene or a little bit later on, but they're all like talking about what they want for Thanksgiving or what they're thankful for, and she's like, I'm thankful for my dad being home for Thanksgiving.
Yeah. just to rub it in.
Yeah. And then they talk about it over dinner.
I love it. He's just thinking, I miss my daughter's pageant, and Dale says, oh, because that's a shame. He says it's terrible.
He's like, those are the precious moments.
Those are the precious moments. You don't get those back.
Yeah, he's just really, but he's being sincere. Like he's not trying to be an asshole.
He doesn't mean it in a bad way. He
doesn't realise, no.
It's just those, saying without thinking properly. It's just one of those things, isn't it?
And then Del, of course, says, hey, I called my friend at whatever airlines they've made up for this film. It's not looking good. And of course, Neil's like, no, I called all the airlines I know.
Yeah.
And he says, hey, I've been thinking, we've put our heads together. And Del's like genuinely like, oh yay!
Yeah,
and he's like, we've come up with nothing.
He sort of like sits forward and sort of like waits for him to say it.
Yeah, and he's like, yeah, we've accomplished nothing.
Yeah,
and he's like, I think it might be easier if we just go our separate ways. And it is so much like a couple breaking up.
Yeah.
And Del is like clearly really upset. And then Neil has to make the excuse. He's like, oh yeah, but it's probably just easier if we travel alone, you know. It's much harder for two people to travel than one, you know. And he's like, I really appreciate it. It's just, you know, it's just easier. And Del, being the injured party, the person getting broken up with, is trying to suck it up. The emotions all over his face, you know.
And I like, he's like tries to give him half of the money. He's like, no, you take this, because I'm just going to leave it there. Then he says, do whatever you want with it.
You see, say like, buy your kids a chocolate turkey or something.
Yeah.
And he says, oh, you know, well, just leave it. I don't care. And then he's like, if you'll excuse me. And he kind of gets up, and obviously he's, you know, he's obviously hurt. But he just says, I hope you get home soon, you know. And leaves. And then Neil again. He immediately regrets his actions. You know, he clearly feels really bad.
Yeah.
But now he's on his own. So he heads to the car rental place, right?
Yeah.
Which is where you said apparently, well, it makes sense that if they had to make their own rental place, they had to rent all of these cars just for this one scene.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy. So of course he's bought a ticket, and he heads to the space, and of course the car's not there.
Yeah.
V5 is completely empty, and
he's dropped off in this massive parking lot, like in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it was big enough that they had to get a coach there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I presume it's
it's an airport, right?
Shuttle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thing, isn't it?
So I guess the inference here is that he has to walk or run all the way back.
Yeah, he's supposed to get to the bus, and the bus doesn't notice him. And
yeah.
He again loses his shit.
Yeah. Throws his bags on the floor.
Throws his bags on the floor. Throws the agreement away.
Yep.
And then has to get back in the snow. And I love that whole thing, because it's one of those things I'm sure most of us have done. Is you're looking at like a slope with snow on it, and you just think, if I take it slow, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Well, you just think, and you immediately know you're just gonna go fucking down this, shoots down this slope, and ends up nearly getting ran over by another fucking bus going the other way.
Yeah.
It loses his hat. His hat goes this time, this time round, and then you've got that great shot of him coming into the airport. I think he's lost his shoes.
He's like covered in like black soot or something. Like he looks like a complete mess.
He's got his tie around his head, which I presume is to keep his jaw from rattling in the cold.
Yes, I guess that's the I guess that's the idea.
It just comes into this thing, and then you've got the what's her name? The great Edie McClure.
Oh, and she's chatting to her friend. Yeah.
To her sister.
Yes. Yeah.
Chatting to her sister, and again, so apparently, because she was the receptionist or whatever she is in Ferris Bueller. Apparently,
yes, she was.
Hughes went up to her and gave her this scene, and he said, read both parts out, and she did that, and he said he just smiled, took it off of her, and walked away, and she said, and that was it. She thought, okay, that was weird, and then she said later on she got a phone call saying, hey, we've got this part for you, come and do it. And the whole telephone conversation was completely ad-libbed by her.
Was it?
Yeah, so the main structure of the scene was written, and the tirade were written, but her conversation wasn't. So she had to do it. And so she riffed this whole thing, and he said to her, how did you come up with that? She says, basically, it's just me talking to my sister. She said, I didn't really have to do very much.
Right, yeah. And of course, it's annoying. He's in a really bad mood. She's talking to her sister.
It's so relatable. It's another one of those
things.
It is, yeah. It's like going to the doctors. Like and there have been places where I've gone to the doctors, and you're stood there for ages at the reception desk.
Yeah.
And the woman is just clearly on a fucking phone call to some random person that has nothing to do with the fucking surgery or anything like that, or wherever you are, and you just think, for fuck's sake, woman, just fucking let me get on with what I want to do.
But you grin and bear it, because you know you need a service here.
Yeah. Exactly.
What you don't do is say you could start by wiping that dumbass smile off your face.
Yeah, that fucking dumbass one off your rosy fucking cheeks.
Oh my god. And then her face just drops immediately. Yeah. And you can tell, like, he goes absolutely crazy about, like, you gave me an automobile that didn't exist, like, give me, and he starts, like, he's like, Dodge, Toyota,
Datsun, a fucking Mustang. Was it four wheels and a seat or something?
Yeah, 4 wheels and a steering wheel or something.
And she says, I don't care for the way you're speaking to me.
Yeah.
So I don't care. Your fucking company left me in the middle of nowhere with keys to a fucking car that wasn't there.
And her face when she's like, have you got the receipt? Have you got the ticket? And he's like, I threw it away. And she's like, then you're fucked.
Yeah, I love it. She says, oh dear. And he says, what do you mean, oh dear? And she says, you're fucked. He says fuck 18 times, and then she says it, and also you got a 19 fuck scene, right? And the thing about this whole scene was, this whole movie could have been a PG. And
was it this scene?
Yeah, the Paramount were like, no, we can cut that scene and do it, and he said no, because
this is breaking point.
Yeah, Steve Martin said that was the scene that did it for him.
I think it's one of the best scenes in the movie, where he's finally broken completely.
Yep. He said that scene and the seat adjusting scene in the car were the two scenes that completely he was put him in this movie. He was like, yeah, I'm totally on board with this movie. So they forewent the whole PG rating basically just for this scene, because
I think it's worth it.
I think with the PG, I think you're allowed 3 fucks.
Yeah, there's way too many.
And yeah, this just goes slightly over that.
Mm-hmm. Just a little.
Apparently, there are TV versions that are sanitized.
Sure.
But yeah, for the actual movie one is, and it's actually, I guess, one of the rare occasions where the company backs down, because usually they want all the bums on seats they can possibly get.
Mm.
And I love the fact that they backed down and let them do it.
Yeah,
it's such a fucking amazing scene.
So then, obviously, he's not getting a car. So he heads outside and he tries to get a cab from St. Louis to Chicago. And the cab guy's like, to Chicago? And he's like,
yes. Where you go in Chicago?
And he's like, you know you're in St. Louis? And he's like, yes, I do. And he says, why don't you get an airline? It'll be faster and you get a free meal. And he's like, if I wanted to see a joke, I would watch you take a leak.
Yeah, I'd follow you into the bathroom and watch you take a leak. And it's like, wow, you just did that to the wrong dude. Because
then he says, like, don't just stand there like a slab of meat with some mittens. And of course the guy slugs him.
Yeah.
Right, and then
fucking deservedly so.
Oh god, yeah, he's being such an asshole at this point. So he falls into the road right in front of Dell's rented car.
Yeah, nearly getting crushed in the process.
Dell genuinely is like, "What are you doing, you crazy person? You were gonna get killed." And he's really worried for his friend. He's like, because he even says, "There's an injured man in here down on the street."
Yeah, this guy's like, "Get him out of there!"
Yeah,
you park that car there.
He's like, no, you help him up. I love the cab driver's like, with pleasure. Just grabs him by the balls.
Him up. Yeah. You just see him like pull his gloves like on properly and go, and he just grabs him by the nuts. It's fucking awesome. And I love it when they're in the car driving along, and he says, "Wow," he says, "I've never seen anybody picked up on the testicles before."
Yeah, he says, "Lucky for you, that cop came when you did."
Yeah. He says, "Have you any idea how happy I am that I didn't kill you?" And he says, "Have you ever no idea how happy I would have been if you did?"
Yeah.
And I do like, that's one of the things I love about this movie is there are some, like, it's got great pathos and great sort of really nice sort of almost serious moments, but they've got some real sort of like over the top silly stuff that works really well because they've altered his voice here to give him this really silly.
Oh yeah, the like high pitch. Yeah,
but you don't care. It's fine. You know, there are scenes later on we'll get to that are just like you think these should be out of place, but they don't. They work.
Yeah.
And I love the car is totally like been decked out to look like the Griswolds.
Yes. Yeah.
Car from Vacation. And it's like it almost looks like another model of that particular sort of brand of car, which I think is brilliant.
It's like the non-estate version of that car. Yeah. So of course, you know, he says, "Oh, you know, Neil's complaining about how difficult it was to find a rental car and that, you know, they didn't have any left." And Dell's like, "Oh, I got one, no problem." You know, he's like, the old Dell charm, you know.
Yeah.
So
he does look fucking shifty when he says it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So later on that night, you know, they're obviously taking it in turns to drive. Neil's now driving, and Dell starts adjusting the seat, trying to get comfortable. And Neil's like, you know, what are you doing? And he's like, "Oh, I've got a bad back." He's like, "Have you ever, you know?" I've got only like a couple of positions that are comfortable. So he's just going up and down on this bloody seat,
sideways, and also it's like, Jesus Christ, this is an amazing adjustable seat.
And then he finally gets comfortable, and he's like, "I gotta take my shoes off." He's like, "You know, I can't reach my shoes," and he's like, "Thank God."
Reach my shoes. I can't reach my shoes.
And then of course, you know, he's saying like, "Oh, you know how much Dell annoys him," and Neil's. And he's like, "Well, you're annoying too." And Neil's like, "Well, name one thing." And he's like, "Name one thing?" He's like, yeah, name one thing. And he's like, "Okay, you play with your balls too much."
I do not.
And he gets really offended by it. He's like, "Well, you said name one thing."
Yeah. And like, he says, "What is it?" He says, "You know what I want?" And he says, "Was it an extra set of balls and more fingers?"
Yeah. He says like Larry Bird handles less balls than you.
Yeah.
So ultimately, you know, Dell has to take over, and it turns out, of course, Dell's broken the seat.
Yep.
And I like Dell's like, "It's impossible to break that seat," and he's like, "How is it impossible to break the seat?"
I love he adjusted and he ends up with his face in the windscreen.
Yeah.
Squished in. He's like, "Yeah, no, it's fine."
Yeah, and Dell's like, "You know, look, I don't want to argue. You know, let's not argue." And he says, "Right, you know, fair enough. I'm going to go to sleep." And
he takes his wallet out, puts it. He says, "Remind me to take my wallet out." Yeah, later because I'm putting it in the glove compartment. It's like, okay,
yeah.
Immediately, you're like, "Yeah, okay, well, that's a good idea."
Yeah. So, you know, Neil is finally asleep. Dell is kind of dancing and singing in the car.
Yeah, I don't know how he's sleeping through the mess around.
No, I know, because it's on obnoxiously loud too.
Yeah. And Dell's there playing along to all the things and stuff, you know.
Dancing. I guess he's trying to stay awake, right? He's doing everything he can to stay awake. And he's going all over the goddamn road, but and he starts doing the he starts playing the keyboard on the dash.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then before long he starts getting warm. He's too warm. Because of course he's wearing this big old blue Parker, isn't he?
Parker, yeah.
And so he starts trying to take it off. He starts with one hand, and of course the one arm, as he's got it halfway down, gets stuck on like the adjusting thing on the seat.
Wheel, yeah.
Yeah, like the knob on the seat. And he's like trying to pull it, and of course he's like weaving in and out of traffic as he does it.
Yeah.
Finally, he's like, okay, I'll free myself from the other side.
And he's also at this point as well trying to flick a cigarette out the window, which
fell in the back seat,
which blew straight into the back seat.
Yeah. And I do like that they quite often, like in the coming scenes, you just see the smoke building in the back.
Yeah, just silently smoldering away.
Just smoldering away. So then, of course, he tries to free the other arm. Instead of trying to, he's like, oh yeah, I'll just free my other arm. But then, of course, that gets stuck on the I guess it's like
another lever.
Yeah, some other lever.
Some other sort of adjustment lever.
Yeah. So now, of course, he's completely stuck. But he grabs the steering wheel with his legs.
Yeah, he's driving with the wheel between his legs, and I love that how happy with himself he looked. He's like, oh, okay, that works. This is fine.
He's like, and now relax.
This is not terribly dangerous at all.
No, and he's like, now I've just got to relax.
He's so desperately pulling at these fucking sleeves. It's just wonderful, and I love that. Eventually
he thinks he's got the hang of it, doesn't he? Because he's just kind of like, there we go, that's it. And of course he doesn't notice that he takes the wrong exit.
Completely the wrong way.
Completely. And comes to basically like a hard turn that he's never gonna make. So he manages to free himself just in the nick of time and spins the car out.
Does completely like.
Oh, it spins like many times because it's snowing, right? There's like ice and snow everywhere.
He's screaming. The car is spinning round. He's screaming. He manages to stop. He's freed himself, and he's like come to this perfectly like safe, almost safe stop at this point. And Neil wakes up and is like, what happened? And he's like sweat pouring off of him. And he's like, oh, he just nearly hit a deer. It's fine.
And then he's like, it's getting hot in here. You should take your parka off. But of course, in the spinning around, Del hadn't noticed that they're now facing the opposite direction on this one-way road. So of course he starts driving back up the road the wrong way. Meanwhile, there's people on the other part of the motorway that start beeping at him and are like, you're going the wrong way.
Yeah, I love how like indignant they are. It's like how would he know where we're going?
Yeah. And while they're saying it, you've got the smoke coming up from the back seat as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love they start giving these guys shit. They're like, how would you know where we're going? They don't know where we're going.
I love that he says he's not going to know where it's going. And like randomly, Neil sort of like logics it out. He's like, yeah, that's very true. How would they know where we're going? He doesn't even think about it. For some reason, it just makes sense to him that this is madness.
And he keeps cutting back to those two trucks coming down the road.
Yeah.
As well.
He keeps making drinky note motions to these two people in this car, and they're just screaming at him, "You're going the wrong way! You're gonna kill somebody!" And then it's at that moment that Neil's like looks over and sees the trucks. It's like, "Oh fuck, we are going the wrong way."
Doesn't he notice the road first, and he realizes they're on a?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, he looks down and sees that the markings are right.
Yeah. So of course they go right between the two trucks, like perfectly between the two trucks. It like removes both wing mirrors, and you get that weird shot of them both as skeletons.
Yeah,
and then Del's the devil.
I was saying about how some of the weird over the top slapstick things.
I like it.
Becoming the skeletons and Dale becoming the devil, laughing at which I absolutely, because clearly it's all in his head.
Of course,
but I think it works so well. It's brilliant.
And the bit I love is when they stop. Neil's hands are stuck in the dashboard where it's been clutching them so hard.
Yeah. and Del's hands are stuck to the steering wheel, which is now bent over.
Yeah. So
and even he's like has trouble removing his hands from the wheel.
So they pull over, and the car is fucked. Like this, the whole sides of both sides are completely knackered. And he's like, "Oh, this isn't so bad. It's nowhere near as bad as I thought it would be." It's like, that'll buff right out.
Yeah, that'll buff right out. It's completely fucked.
And then they
Well, the trunk catapulted over the.
Yes, yeah. There's luggage all over the floor now.
Yeah, so it's all over the road. He's just help me get my trunk back.
And of course, Del's like, laughing about it. He's like, "Wow, we almost died." Neil's face is just like absolute disgust.
Yeah. And this is where he basically fesses up to using his card to pay for the rental.
Yes.
And how,
Yeah, because he's like, "Oh, well, I'm glad this car's not in my name." And Del's kind of got that look of like, well.
Yeah. And I love it. He's like really, he's completely pissed off with him at this point. He says to him, "How did, because you stole my card?" He goes, No, I didn't steal your card. It obviously got like mixed up. He said, "Well, how do you know that?" He goes, No, it's fine. Because he says, "Well, what's he? Oh fuck, what is it he says about the card?" And he says, that's right. He starts shaking him, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And he says, "I put it back." He says, "I was going to pay you back." He said, "Then I put the card back." They look over at the car, and he's now starting to smolder.
Well, I like his Del first, isn't it? Del looks back, and he's just kind of got that worried look, and he just kind of looks away from it, like he's just like tries to ignore it for a moment until Neil looks back and sees it.
Yeah.
But then they're both like, "Oh, fuck it."
I think it's the whole absurdity of it.
Yeah.
All you can do is laugh at that point.
Yeah. But yeah, so now the car's on fire.
Yep.
They have their manic laugh.
Yep.
And I do think this is kind of the point where they I think Neil comes to embrace him, where they're just both like, sod it, this is so ridiculous now.
Well, at first, then it's we did.
Then he learns about the credit card, of course.
I did that in the wrong order.
Well, it doesn't matter.
It's then that he learns about the card, and he does punch him in the gut, which is hilarious.
Yeah. And then he like finally starts crying on him, doesn't he? In the end, he's just like completely broken, and then he falls over the case again.
Yeah. Because
then he punches him in the gut and starts walking away, and then falls over the case.
Yeah.
But then of course somehow they've put the car out, and they're still gonna drive it. Like the roof is missing because it's just melted.
Yeah.
The steering wheel's melted.
It's still smouldering. It's still apparently boiling hot.
Well, yeah, because and Neil's the one driving, and his hands are stuck on the steering wheel, where it's all just melted rubber still. Because it's still smoking when they pull up, right?
Yeah.
And you can see the seats are just bare metal, just smoldering metal. And they're like, right, we're getting separate rooms. That's it. They go to the motel, and he's like, right, you'll need a credit card. And he starts getting out all of these different cards that are just completely burnt and
charred, melted mess.
Yeah.
And what is it? He's got 20 something bucks or something.
Yeah.
And he says, "I can't." He says, "That's not enough." He says,
because it's double that, isn't it? It's like 40 odd or something.
He goes, "Here," and how about this watch? This is a really expensive watch. He takes it off. He puts it on the thing. The guy's like, "Yeah, fine." So he takes it, and I love. And the client looks at him like expectantly. It's like, okay, we're in the same position here. I'm going to get another nice watch. And I love. Dale says, "What have you got?" He says, "I've got $2 and a Casio." And I love the way he drapes the Casio over his arm. Like it's some exotic thing, and it's like, clearly, no, that's not going to work. And I like the way he says, "It's not my place." It's like, I can't just give it over. It's like, fine.
Yeah.
So Neil gets his room, and Dell's out in the cold, sat in the car
Yeah.
with his hat on and the snow coming down.
Yeah, it's like a blizzard now.
Yeah, and he starts talking to his wife, doesn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, he starts talking to his wife. In fact, I think he's talking to his wife while Neil's inside talking to his wife, right? Because he phones his wife.
Oh, I think so, yeah.
Or he phones and she doesn't answer. I can't remember. I know he makes a phone call and then Dell is outside talking to his wife, saying he wishes she was there, and he misses her.
He says, "I finally met someone I like." He says, "Like I opened my mouth again and ruined it."
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so blatantly clear that she's not fucking there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was clear from the moment you got the picture out, really. At least it is to me, which I always thought was the point, because I always thought it was Neil's selfishness and inability to kind of overlook his situation to realize that clearly.
Yeah.
Because, he drops enough hints.
Mm-hmm.
But it's only later, once the whole situation's resolved, that Neil starts to think it through and realize. But again, Neil does have a heart, and again, he's in bed, quiet, comfortable, but he's like, no, I can't do it. And he looks out the window and he sees the guy just sat there in the snow. And he opens the door and he's like, you're gonna freeze to death out here. What are you doing? They have a proper bonding session, and I love the way this whole shot is kind of framed, where now even Neil's now the one with crap all over his side of the bed. He's become the slob. He's eating Doritos and then they're drinking.
Yeah, this is a great combination or something, isn't it?
Yes, like Doritos and some whiskey or scotch or something.
Yeah, they've got like
all the tasters,
a mini selection of little mini bar selection of booze. They're going by country or something.
Yeah,
it's about he's going to Jamaica and he's having some rum. And I like they have that sort of thing where he says about isn't it great that we've got wives to go back to?
Yeah,
and because that's the great thing, is we've got someone to grow old with and all that, and you can just see it in his face. Poor old Dell's like, yep, certainly. And he says, what I have for my wife is love's not big enough word for it.
Yeah, and it's written all over his face.
Yeah, it's like to the wives sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I love that he goes up there talking about how hot the thing was, and he's saying about, does it turn me over? I'm done on this side or something.
Yeah.
Which apparently is a reference to a saint, like the patron saint of who was being burnt, and that was apparently what he said.
Oh, really? Now, I didn't know that.
He's the patron saint of, I think, was it St. Lawrence? I think he's the patron saint of comedians now, apparently.
Huh.
And again, he does the weirdest things. He goes to the toilet, comes back, and instead of like turning the light out, he tries to take the bulb out or something.
Yeah, I don't quite know what he's doing.
Burns himself on the bulb. I don't. Like, unless that's where the off switch was or something. I don't know.
I can't imagine it is.
No.
But yeah. So in any case, the next morning they have to get out of the space, and of course it's been snowing all night. And so they're struggling to get out of the spot. And he's like, we're gonna have to rock it. So of course Neil gets up front, starts pushing, and of course he's got it in reverse. He puts it on full throttle, straight backwards into the motel, smashing the front of the motel in.
And I love the way he sat there in the car in the middle of this room, basically.
Yeah.
And he just goes, huh.
Yeah. And Neil's like, come on, let's go.
Yeah. Let's get the fuck out of here. We gotta go. So they just drive off.
Oh, such a good scene. So yeah, then they're driving down the road, and I love how I mean, I don't know, I don't know. I'm assuming they did somehow made it safe for the shot, because it's not just the rims of the wheel. The wheels are shaking so much. Like, it looks like they're about to fall off any minute.
Yeah.
And then they're just driving down the road singing and just kind of enjoying the ride. They're going like 78 miles an hour or something. The cop pulls them for. And of course the cop pulls him over. He's like, "Do you know how fast you were going?" And he's like, "No." all the dials have melted.
Yeah.
Like, it makes it kind of hard to tell.
What you were doing? Not a 1, no. I love it. He says, yeah, you've got no side mirrors, no. You've got no dials, no. He says, but he says, surprisingly, the radio works perfectly.
Yeah. And he says, like, you know, he's like, "Fellas, I cannot let you drive in this car." And he's like, "Look, please, this man has to get back to his family for Thanksgiving." And of course, that's not going to work.
No, he says, "They're going to have to impound it. You have to make your own way from there."
Yeah, so they're taken back to the courthouse, right? They're like towed back to the courthouse.
So this is another scene that was altered. So
oh, really?
Yeah, Michael McKean he's like fourth build.
Yeah,
and he's only in it for like a minute or two. So the actual scene originally was a really long scene.
Oh,
and
was there a scene at the courthouse then, or
no? So there's the scene with them at the roadside. He tells them that they've overshot Chicago by like 10 miles.
Oh, okay.
So he tells them that they've overshot, and Martin and Candy basically end up chasing each other around the car, and with Neil trying to punch him, and the cop sort of like breaks them up. So it was a much bigger sort of, you know, more elaborate scene, and they basically decided that because, you know, for time and stuff, and to sort of cut it down, they reshot it. They actually called back McKean, and he actually reshot the scene for basically just the stop, which I've never actually noticed, but apparently there are different skies within the scene. So there's like a winter sky in when they pull up and stuff, and then when they're doing the other, you know, when they're carrying on, the sky's completely different. I've never noticed.
I hadn't noticed either, actually.
No. So yeah, it was a much longer scene, and they cut it, they hacked it right down.
Is that because they wanted to do the truck scene? Because I guess if they've only overshot by like 10 miles, it's not actually that far. Whereas in this, they then have to get the truck now, don't they?
Yeah, well, I think they just sort of altered it so that the truck was a different thing. Instead of just going back, it was going
further
to where they're going. Yeah. And it also explains why Dale has a black eye.
Yes, that's a good point.
He's got a black eye. Yeah, so Neil punches him
right
in the face. So he's got a black eye, and there's no explanation as to why he's got that later.
So Neil is kind of stood outside the courthouse, not sure what to do, when Dell pulls up in this big old red truck, and he says, "Hey, look, it's free, and it's not going to stop. It basically is going to Chicago, so it will get us there as fast as possible with as little delay." But of course, the guy, he says, like, the guy is terrified of passengers or something.
Yeah.
So they all have to get in the back.
Like people up in his truck.
Yeah. Even though Dell just came from up in the truck.
Yeah, I always thought that was funny as well. I was like, you sat there with him.
Yeah, he was sat there with him, but apparently he can't stand people in his truck, so they have to sit in the back. And he says, "Well, look, you know, you should get back pretty quick now, assuming there's no traffic." But yeah, so they go by truck the rest of the way, finally making it into Chicago. So now they're just a train journey away from their respective homes. And, you know, I do think they kind of have this heartfelt moment where they're like, you know, you got home and it's going to be all right. And Um, it's way more sad because you know that Del has nowhere to go now.
Yeah.
Like, this is kind of, you assume at this point that he's just going home to his wifeless home, right? Obviously, after this, we learn he doesn't even have a home anymore. He doesn't have anywhere to live. But your assumption at this point, I think, is like he's going home, but there's no one there.
Yeah.
But yeah, and they both say, we're wiser. We're both a little wiser now, and even Neil's like, yeah, I'm a little wiser too. And they do have a genuine hug, and they wish each other a happy Thanksgiving. And he says, I'll say hello to Marie for me, and you can see it on his face as soon as he says it. It's like, yeah. But yeah, so he gets on the train, and he does have that like sigh of relief once he's on the train. I don't think it's so much getting rid of Del as much as it is now like, I've done it.
Yeah.
I'm next stop is home.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we kind of see it from both perspectives. Neil's on his short train ride now. Del's like kind of carrying his luggage back on his own.
Yeah.
But now that the crisis is over, now that he's made it, he actually starts to think. Because at first he starts thinking about his family, doesn't he? He starts thinking about his kids. Yeah, then he starts thinking about his wife. And then he starts thinking about Thanksgiving. And then Del's wife. He starts thinking about all the things that Del has said about his wife.
Yeah. And
it starts to occur to him, oh shit, I think she's not even alive anymore.
Yeah.
Finally he realizes that maybe he's been a bit of an asshole and, quite ignorant. And so
those shots of him and the train.
Yeah.
Again, so these again were slightly altered from the movie,
right?
From the original. So those shots were actually candid shots of Martin. They weren't.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he was going over pages for the next day, sort of thing.
Right. I mean, they work though. You couldn't tell.
Hughes said his expressions were so great that he just wanted to film him, so he filmed him. And when they came to rewrite this, how the changes to the movie, he thought this would be perfect because it looks like he's thinking about Dale.
It does. It works really well. You'd never know that this was just a stock shot that they had. It works perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so he heads back, of course.
I don't know whether you've ever noticed. I did notice this when the train pulls back in. When he's on the train coming back to Dale, the train coming in is backwards. If you look just as the train's pulling in, there's a dude walking backwards.
Well, it is also stopping on the wrong side.
Yes,
because it's stopping on the same side he left from, which makes no sense at all.
Which is funny.
I hadn't noticed someone walking backwards before, but I had noticed it's on the same side. So
yeah.
But yeah, so of course he finds Del sat in the kind of reception area.
Yeah.
And he's like, "What are you doing here, Del?" And of course he explains. He basically says he doesn't have anywhere to go. He doesn't have a home anymore.
Yeah. Marie's been dead for 8 years.
Yeah.
I don't have a house to go back to.
Yeah.
You think, Jesus, this dude's just been like circling America for 8 years.
Yeah. And now of course it's like this massive holiday as well, which must make things way harder.
Yeah.
And
it's all in Candy's eyes.
He is a superb actor,
Yeah.
And then this kind of shows it perfectly well. Like he's got such he's got such great eyes. You're right. It is mostly his eyes and his facial expressions.
Yeah.
But of course, it's a Thanksgiving movie or a Christmas movie. You know how it's going to end. And it's a lovely ending. I really like this ending. He takes him home.
Yep.
And I assume he called ahead. I assume. But
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, I would assume so. And yeah, because you know, his wife's like looks really upset, doesn't she? She like looks.
Yeah, so it's always slightly.
I assume she's upset because she's heard this tragic story, rather than.
I guess I never thought that. I always thought it was She just seems to have a very odd reaction to him, like he's been gone for like years or something.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe it is kind of awkward. Maybe I just like headcanoned that to make sense.
Why? So again, in a missing from the original movie.
Oh, okay, because this is how I took it, not knowing there was a missing. So what's in the missing scene?
There's a missing subplot where she thinks.
She thinks Dell is like a woman or something, and
yeah, she thinks he's having an affair. So she thinks he's not coming home because he's with another woman.
Right. So this scene was meant to be a big reveal that the person he's been traveling with is just this guy.
So it makes a lot more sense why with her reaction, because I've always thought it was a very odd sort of reaction when he comes home. Just there's always been something that's top.
I think I must have headcanoned that and just thought, oh, he's obviously told her this horrible story about this guy, and she just feels like
that would have made sense if I'd never thought about it that way. If that would have, but yeah. So there's again another sort of thing.
Yeah,
but so the whole thing was when it was longer when they did the test screening, and the end was not him bringing him home. It's literally he follows him all the way home. He goes with him, and he gets to the doorway, and then he decides that he doesn't want to go in, and he walks off, and that's how it ends. In the original.
I'm not sure about that.
And apparently the original test audience as well didn't like the Dell character because they thought he was a complete moocher freeloader, and they didn't have the sort of enough of the the idea of him being sad and all that sort. So they completely recut it. They took it away, and he cut it right the way down to the hour and 30 that it is, and restructured a lot of the scenes to make it what it is. So I'm so glad that they did.
Me too.
I'm annoyed that they hacked some of the scenes that would have made more sense. But
it's not movie breaking though. Like it does all work.
It's not. It's really good. But there is one apparently in the train station, I think it is. There's a whole like speech that Candy gives. Apparently, that's a really beautiful speech.
Oh.
And it was completely cut. And apparently, Martin was absolutely livid that it had been cut because he said it was a the best part of Candy's performance. And I have no idea.
Oh, I'd love to see it.
Never seen the speech, but yeah, apparently there was a really lovely speech that was cut, sadly.
Mm.
And there's a whole other part, the things that were cut. Like there's a bit where I can't remember which part it is. It's later in the movie. They go to a strip club, and Dale's watching the girls while I think Neil's trying to make a phone call. And the actress that was in that scene didn't know it had been cut until the premiere.
Oh my god!
She'd gone to see the premiere thinking, I'm in this movie, and her scene was completely bloody cut.
Wow.
So the original movie was quite different, and I'm so glad that they did. I mean, you end with the wife saying hello to Dale, and Dale, looking longingly at the family, and you stop on the freeze frame. So I love that ending to this. It's a beautiful.
I think it's a really lovely ending.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely love this film. I think it's tremendous. I think it's certainly in terms of Thanksgiving movies, I think this might be my favorite.
I mean, it's really the only Thanksgiving movie that I know that, for certain. I think
I think there's a few.
Addams Family 2 is Thanksgiving, isn't it?
Yeah.
off the top of my head, I can't think of many others, and I'm sure there are, but yeah, this is the one that is definitely one of those, like, yes, it's a Thanksgiving movie.
Over here, it's a Christmas movie, but yes, over there, it's a Thanksgiving movie for sure. And it's one of those interesting things. Now that you've said that as a kid you thought that Thanksgiving was just Christmas for Americans. Or for didn't you say it was for non-Christians?
Possibly for non-religious.
That's an interesting Americans. Idea, because it is very similar to Christmas from our ignorant kind of island perspective. And I think in my head I'd always kind of assumed it was just like a Christmas movie because it was always on over Christmas. You know, it was always one of those, like, there was always the big thing over here. I don't know if it was the same in the States. I'm guessing it was at one point. Over here, it was the TV times and the radio times, right?
Yeah.
It was the big thing because they always did the double edition for Christmas and New Year.
Yep.
And you'd always see Planes, Trains in there. It would always be in that listing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Always be on that.
But yeah, so that
I think it's it's probably. I mean, my favourite Candy movie is Uncle Buck.
Yeah, you're not going to beat Uncle Buck.
But this is. It's probably my second.
I would agree with that. I think, I think so.
And I think it's the same with Martin. I think my favourite Martin movie is The Man with Two Brains.
Yeah.
But this comes pretty bloody close.
It's fantastic. Yeah, it really is a fantastic movie. But in any case, that was Planes, Trains, and Automobiles by John Hughes. Directed and written from 1987. Obviously.
As well.
Sorry?
He produced as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Did the triple on this one.
So yeah, obviously highly recommended by us. You've probably already watched it though, because Thanksgiving was last week. But never mind. We will be back next week with our usual review fare, and then we'll be doing a Christmas movie. But that's 2 weeks' time. So yes, we'll be back next week with whatever we've found. New releases, but until then, stay safe, take care, and we'll catch you next time.